The kitchen smelled like coffee and bacon grease. Rob Hayes stood at the stove, one hand on the spatula, the other reaching for the salt. Monday morning sunlight cut through the window above the sink, the same window he'd looked through for 30 years. Same chipped formica countertop, same coffee maker that Maria had picked out before Dan was born. "You want your eggs over easy or scrambled?" Rob called over his shoulder. Dan fidgeted with his tie at the kitchen table. Navy blue, expensive. A gift from Tori, probably. The kid looked like he belonged in a boardroom now, not in this kitchen with its outdated appliances and linoleum floor that Rob kept meaning to replace. "Over easy's fine, Dad." Dan's voice carried that nervous edge, the same tone he'd had before his high school graduation speech, before his first college exam, before he'd asked Tori to marry him. Rob slid the eggs onto a plate next to the bacon and toast, set it in front of his son. Dan was 28 now, but sitting there in his pressed shirt and new suit, he could have been 18 again, nervous about his first job interview. "Blackwell Properties," Rob said, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "One of the biggest development firms in San Antonio." "I know." Dan picked up his fork, set it down again. "Dad, I want to make you proud. Preston said this is a real opportunity, said he sees potential in me." Rob sat down across from him, studying his son's face. Dan had Maria's eyes, dark brown, expressive. Right now they held something that made Rob's chest tighten, not excitement, something closer to dread. "You earned this position," Rob said carefully. "Business degree from UT, top of your class, don't let anyone tell you different." Dan nodded, but his eyes dropped to his plate. There it was again, that weight Dan had carried since he was a kid. Brilliant, hard-working, but always questioning if he was enough. Rob had spent 28 years trying to build that confidence, brick by careful brick. Some days it felt like trying to build a house on sand. "Your mom would have been so proud," Rob said quietly. Dan's throat worked. "I wish she could have seen it." "She can." Rob tapped his chest. "Right here." They ate in silence after that, the comfortable kind that comes from being each other's only family for 10 years. Maria's picture sat on the mantel in the living room, visible through the doorway. Forever 38, forever smiling, forever holding baby Dan in her arms. When Dan stood to leave, he grabbed his briefcase, then turned back. "Thanks for everything, Dad. For breakfast, for working those double shifts to pay my tuition, for—" "Hey," Rob gripped his shoulder. "That's what fathers do. Now get out of here before you're late." Dan grinned, and for a moment the nervousness disappeared. Then he was gone, backing his Honda down the driveway. Rob stood on the porch, watching until the car turned the corner. That uneasy feeling that had been sitting in his gut all morning settled deeper into his bones. He tried to shake it off, went inside and washed the dishes, changed into work clothes for the construction site he needed to inspect, but the feeling wouldn't leave. It sat in his chest like a stone. He picked up his phone 3 times to call Dan, then put it down. The kid was a grown man. He didn't need his old man hovering on his first day. Rob tried to focus on the bid he needed to submit for the Henderson project, on the crew schedule for the week. Hayes Construction wasn't big, but it was solid. 35 years of building it from nothing, and it kept food on the table. But he couldn't concentrate. Finally, around 11, Rob made a decision. He'd swing by Blackwell Properties, maybe bring Dan some lunch, just to check in, make sure everything was okay. Just to quiet that voice in his head that sounded like Maria. "Something's wrong, Rob. Go check on our boy." The Blackwell Properties building sat downtown, all glass and steel, the kind of structure that screamed money and power. Rob parked his dusty F-150 between a Mercedes and a BMW, feeling suddenly out of place in his work boots and Hayes Construction shirt. The lobby hit him with cold air conditioning and marble floors. A young woman at the reception desk looked up with a professional smile. Her nameplate read, Rachel Porter. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you?" "I'm looking for my son, Dan Hayes. He started today." The smile froze on her face. Her eyes widened, and something passed across her features. Pity. Maybe fear. She glanced toward the elevators, then back to Rob. "Oh, Mr. Hayes, let me just check on that for you." Rob's gut feeling crystallized into certainty. "Which floor?" "Sir, if you'll just wait." But Rob was already moving toward the elevators. Behind him, he heard Rachel pick up the phone, her voice low and urgent. The elevator ride to the 3rd floor felt endless. His son had a business degree from UT Austin, 4 years of school, internships, networking. Why would something feel this wrong on his first day? The doors opened to a sterile hallway. Rob followed the signs until he found a utility corridor. Voices echoed ahead, male voices laughing. One of them made his skin crawl. Rob rounded the corner and stopped. Through the half-open door, he saw his son on his knees in front of a toilet. Dan wore yellow rubber gloves that went up to his elbows, holding a scrub brush. His suit jacket, that expensive jacket Tori had bought him, hung on a hook behind the door. His white shirt was damp with sweat. His shoulders were hunched in a way that made him look broken. Standing over him was a man in his early 50s, silver hair, perfectly styled, suit that probably cost more than Rob's mortgage payment. 2 other men flanked him, both smirking. "This is the only service this idiot knows how to do." The silver-haired man's voice dripped with contempt. "Business degree from UT, and he can't even scrub a toilet properly." The other men laughed. Then Rob saw her. Tori stood off to the side in a designer dress, arms crossed. She wasn't laughing, but she wasn't stopping it either. The slight smile on her face made Rob's stomach turn. Dan looked up. Their eyes met. Time slowed down. Shame washed over Dan's face. His eyes were red-rimmed. He'd been crying. He tried to mouth something, "Please don't." Rob couldn't tell, but he understood. His boy was begging him not to see him like this. Something inside Rob's chest cracked clean through. "Can I help you?" The silver-haired man turned toward Rob, irritated. "I'm Dan's father." The man's expression shifted to amusement. "Ah, Mr. Hayes, I'm Preston Blackwell. Your son is learning the business from the ground up." He gestured at the toilet. "Literally." His cronies chuckled. "Dan," Rob kept his voice steady, though every muscle in his body was coiled tight. "Get up." "He's not finished," Preston's voice sharpened. "He's on company time." Rob had spent 35 years swinging hammers. He knew exactly where to hit to make it count. One punch. That's all it would take to wipe that smirk off Preston Blackwell's perfect face. But Dan shook his head. "Just slightly. Don't make it worse." Rob forced his hands to unclench. "We'll talk later, son." He looked at Preston. "You and I will talk too, Mr. Blackwell." Preston waved a dismissive hand. "I'm a busy man." "You'll make time." Rob walked back to the elevator before he did something he'd regret. The doors closed. He was alone. He pressed his palms against the cold metal walls and squeezed his eyes shut. "No one gets to do this to my son." Rob sat in his truck, hands gripping the steering wheel. The Texas sun beat down through the windshield, but he felt cold. His phone sat on the passenger seat next to a half-eaten sandwich he'd bought for Dan, the sandwich he'd never delivered. Memories flashed through his mind. Maria in her hospital bed 10 years ago, stage 4 pancreatic cancer. She'd gripped his hand with what little strength she had left. "Take care of our boy, Rob. Promise me. He's going to need you to be strong." "I promise." He doubts himself too much, like his mama. She'd smiled, even then. "You have to believe in him enough for both of us." Dan at his graduation, cap and gown, that huge smile. The same smile Maria had, the same doubt hiding behind it. Rob picked up his phone and dialed. It rang twice. "Hayes, haven't heard from you in a month. What's going on?" Bill Crawford. They'd known each other 25 years, met on a construction site in Houston. Bill had been doing forensic accounting work after a contractor fraud case. Rob had been the foreman who'd helped him understand how the construction side of the scam worked. They'd stayed friends ever since. "Bill, I need your help. Something big." The tone in Rob's voice must have registered. Bill's response was immediate, serious. "Talk to me. I need you to investigate someone. Preston Blackwell. Blackwell Properties here in San Antonio." Silence on the other end. Then, "The Preston Blackwell? Rob, what's this about?" "I need to know everything. His company, his finances, his weaknesses, everything." "How deep?" "As deep as it goes." More silence. Rob could picture Bill in his Austin office, probably standing now, pacing the way he did when he was thinking. "Rob, in 25 years, you've never asked me for anything like this. What happened?" Rob's jaw tightened. "Someone hurt my son. I need to know how to hurt them back." "Hurt them back or stop them from hurting him again. There's a difference." Rob looked at the Blackwell Properties building through his windshield, glass and steel and cruelty. Both, he said quietly. Give me until tomorrow morning. I'll call you. Bill? Yeah? Keep this quiet. I don't want anyone knowing I'm looking into him. Understood. Rob? Be careful. Men like Blackwell don't get to where they are by being stupid. Neither do men like me. Rob hung up and sat in the silence of his truck. He didn't start the engine, didn't drive away. He just sat there, staring at nothing, while rage and calculation warred in his chest. Rob heard the key in the lock at 9:15 that night. He'd been sitting in the dark living room for the past hour, waiting. The only light came from the kitchen, where he'd left dinner warming in the oven. Meatloaf, Dan's favorite, the same recipe Maria used to make. The front door opened. Dan came through like a ghost, shoulders hunched, eyes down. The smell of cleaning chemicals clung to his clothes. Industrial strength, the kind that made your eyes water. When Dan saw Rob sitting there, he tried to turn away. Come here, son. Dan's face crumpled. Just like that. 28 years old, business degree, married man, and he was crying like he used to when he was 7 and scraped his knee. Rob stood and pulled him into his arms. Dan shook against his chest. It's not your fault, Rob said into his hair. None of this is your fault. I'm sorry you had to see that, Dad. I'm so sorry. You've got nothing to apologize for. They stood there until Dan's breathing steadied. Then Rob guided him to the couch, the same one where Dan used to fall asleep watching Saturday morning cartoons. Dan sat down heavy, like his strings had been cut. Preston said I'm learning from the bottom up, Dan said quietly, staring at his hands. They were red, chapped from the cleaning chemicals. Tori said it's just temporary, 6 weeks of rotating through different positions. Then I get a real job if I prove myself. 6 weeks. Rob filed that number away. Doing what? Toilets every day? Toilets, mailroom, warehouse inventory, whatever needs doing. Dan's voice was hollow. He paraded me in front of those investors, Dad, made jokes about how I married above my station. Rob's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice calm. What did Tori say? She said her father is old-fashioned, that this is how he tests everyone, that I just need to tough it out. And you believe her? Dan looked up, confused. She's my wife. Rob wanted to say 1,000 things about how Tori had stood there watching, about how Preston's test wasn't about business, it was about breaking people, about how 6 weeks of humiliation wouldn't prove anything except whether Dan could endure abuse. But Dan wasn't ready to hear it, not yet. Listen to me, Dan. Rob leaned forward, hands clasped between his knees. Can you hold on a little longer? Can you trust me? What do you mean? Just trust me. Keep your head down. Do what he says. And in a few weeks, everything's going to change. Dad, what are you planning to... Trust me. Dan studied his father's face. Whatever he saw there made him nod slowly. Okay, he said. I trust you. Rob pulled him into another hug. Good. Now eat some meatloaf before it dries out. Dan managed a weak smile. Mom's recipe? Your mom's recipe. They ate together at the kitchen table, not saying much. But when Dan left that night, heading back to the house he shared with Tori, he stood a little straighter than when he'd arrived. After the door closed, Rob sat alone in the quiet house. He picked up Maria's picture from the mantel. I know what you'd say, he told her. You'd say violence isn't the answer, that I should talk to the man, try to work it out. He traced her face with his thumb. But Sarah, honey, some men only understand one language, and Preston Blackwell just declared war on our son. He set the picture down gently. So I'm going to speak his language, and I'm going to make sure he understands every word. The Milagro Cafe smelled like fresh tortillas and strong coffee. It was barely 7 in the morning, but the place was already filling with the breakfast crowd, construction workers, nurses coming off night shifts, early rising retirees. Bill Crawford sat in a corner booth, away from listening ears, with a manila folder thick enough to be a phone book. Rob slid into the seat across from him. That was fast. You said you needed it. Besides, Blackwell isn't exactly hiding his problems. Bill slid the folder across the table. The man's drowning, Rob. Rob opened it. Spreadsheets, property assessments, loan documents, vendor contracts, everything laid bare in black and white. Blackwell Properties is $15 million in debt, Bill said, keeping his voice low. Not 12, like the public filings suggest. 15. 2 failed luxury condo projects, one in Houston, one in Dallas, both underwater. The banks are circling, and Preston's got maybe 60 days before they call everything in. Rob studied the numbers. He'd built his own business from nothing, learned to read financial statements the hard way. These numbers told a story of greed and overreach. He lives like he's rich, Bill continued, sliding over another page. Mansion in Alamo Heights, mortgage to the hilt. The cars are leased, country club membership he can't afford. It's all smoke and mirrors. One strong wind and the whole thing collapses. How much would it take to buy him out? Bill looked up sharply. Buy him out? Rob, you're talking about serious money. 7, maybe 8 million to acquire majority stake and assume control. Rob took a sip of coffee, thinking. There's more, Bill said. And this is where it gets interesting. Preston's got loan shark connections. Guy named Viktor Kozlov, Russian, mob connected. Preston borrowed $4 million from him 18 months ago when the bank started saying no. When's it due? 45 days. Rob's mind was already working through possibilities. So he's desperate. Beyond desperate, which makes him dangerous. Bill leaned forward. But here's the thing. There's a potential buyer already circling. Wagner Development Group out of Austin. They've made preliminary inquiries about acquiring Blackwell Properties. How preliminary? Preliminary enough that Preston's been taking meetings, but Wagner's smart. They're doing their due diligence slowly. They know Preston's desperate, so they're playing it cool, waiting for the price to drop. Rob sat back, processing. What if Preston had another option, someone willing to move faster? Bill's eyes narrowed. Rob, do you have $8 million? I have $3.2 million. Savings, rental properties, investments, 35 years of living small. That's your entire retirement. Money grows back, Bill. Dignity doesn't. Bill was quiet for a long moment. Even if you had the full $8 million, Wagner's already in play. You'd be competing against a major firm with deeper pockets. Then I need partners, and I need to know everything about Viktor Kozlov. If Preston owes him $4 million in 45 days, that's leverage. Bill pulled out a small notebook, started writing. I can get you information on Kozlov, but Rob, these aren't the kind of people you want to mess with. I'm not planning to mess with them. I'm planning to use them. How? If Preston's got Viktor breathing down his neck, he can't afford to wait for Wagner to make their move. He needs cash fast, which means he'll take the first legitimate offer that comes along. Bill studied Rob's face. You're serious about this? Someone tried to break my son. You think I'm going to just let that slide? No, Bill said quietly. I've known you too long. You're going to do something about it. Question is, are you sure this is the right way? Rob thought about Dan on his knees, scrubbing a toilet while Preston Blackwell laughed, thought about Maria's last words, take care of our boy. It's the only way, he said. Preston Blackwell thinks money and power make him untouchable. Time to show him he's wrong. Bill closed his notebook. All right, I'll dig deeper into Viktor Kozlov and get you details on Wagner's timeline. But Rob, if you're really going to do this, you're going to need more than money. You're going to need a plan. Then let's build one. They sat in that corner booth for another hour, two old friends, mapping out a war against a man who'd made the mistake of hurting the wrong person's son. Outside, San Antonio woke up to another sunny day. Inside, Rob Hayes was learning that sometimes the best way to build something new is to first tear down what's rotten. The call came on a Tuesday morning, 35 days after Rob had started his investigation. Bill's voice on the phone sounded pleased. It worked. Wagner Development just pulled their offer. Rob was in his truck, parked outside a job site. He'd been staring at blueprints without really seeing them, his mind on Dan, on Preston, on everything riding on this plan. You're sure? Got confirmation from my source inside Wagner. Their due diligence team discovered Preston's connection to Viktor Kozlov. Anonymous tip led them straight to the loan documents. Bill paused. Rob, they're spooked. Wagner's board decided the legal liability is too high. They're walking away. Rob closed his eyes, exhaled slowly. Nathan's contact came through. Better than we hoped. Wagner sent Preston a formal letter this morning withdrawing their offer. He's got 25 days until Victor's deadline and 0 backup options. What about Victor? Any blowback? Bill's tone shifted, became more serious. That's the problem. Victor's people know someone's been digging into Preston's finances. They're not happy about it. Rob's stomach tightened. How unhappy? Unhappy enough that one of Victor's associates visited my office yesterday. Big guy, Eastern European accent, asked very politely who hired me to investigate Preston Blackwell. What did you tell him? That I couldn't disclose client information. He said, and I quote, Mr. Kozlov protects his investments. Anyone who interferes with Preston Blackwell paying his debt becomes Mr. Kozlov's problem. Bill exhaled. Rob, we kicked a hornet's nest. These aren't the kind of people who forgive interference. Rob's hand tightened on the phone. He'd put Bill in danger, put himself in danger, put his whole team at risk. We need to finish this fast, Rob said, before Victor decides we're a bigger problem than Preston. There's one way to keep Victor happy, Bill said. Make sure Preston can pay him. Our deal needs to give Preston $4 million in cash up front. That changes our financing structure. I know, instead of $8.2 million total, we need $4 million liquid cash and the rest can be financed through the company's assets. Michael says he can get us a credit line for another $4 to $6 million using Blackwell properties as collateral. So we're leveraging the company we're buying to finance the purchase? Risky, but legal. And it means Victor gets paid, which means he leaves us alone. Rob thought through the implications. If they couldn't turn Blackwell properties around, if they couldn't make it profitable, they'd all lose their investments. The company would default on the credit line, and they'd lose everything. What does Michael say? He's nervous, but he's in. Says if we're going to do this, we might as well do it right. And the others? Nathan's good. David and Thomas are good. Everyone knows the risks. Bill paused. Rob, there's still time to back out. No one would blame you. Rob thought about Dan in that warehouse, broken by Tori's betrayal. Thought about Eddie Sullivan's warning that Dan was the fourth victim. Thought about all the other people Preston would destroy if no one stopped him. No, Rob said. We're finishing this. Send the offer to Preston today. That afternoon, a FedEx envelope arrived at Preston Blackwell's office. Preston tore it open at his desk, Gregory Winters and Frank Morrison sitting across from him. His lawyer and accountant had been in emergency sessions with him for 3 days, ever since Wagner had withdrawn their offer. Rio Grande Holdings, LLC, Preston read aloud, scanning the letterhead. Austin address, professional formatting, corporate language. The letter was direct. Intent to purchase 60% of Blackwell Properties Corporation for total consideration of $10 million, $4 million cash at closing, $6 million secured financing to be paid over 5 years, 48-hour response deadline. Gregory leaned forward, reading over Preston's shoulder. Who are they? I don't know. Preston's voice was tight. Frank, have you heard of them? Frank Morrison pulled out his laptop, started searching. Rio Grande Holdings, LLC, registered in Austin 6 months ago. Real estate investment group. 3 principals listed: Nathan Blackwell, Michael Stevens, Thomas Bennett. Preston's head snapped up. Nathan, my brother Nathan? That's what it says. That son of a bitch. Preston stood, paced to the window. He's been waiting for this, waiting for me to fail. Sir, Frank said carefully, we need to focus on the terms. $4 million cash up front. I know what it means. Preston's jaw clenched. It means I pay Victor and have just enough left to survive. Gregory cleared his throat. Preston, Victor's deadline is in 24 days. We're out of options. The banks won't extend your credit lines. Wagner walked away. This is the only offer on the table. From my brother, who I forced out of the company 5 years ago. You don't think that's suspicious? Suspicious or not, it's legitimate, Gregory said. I can verify the company, the financing, everything. The terms are actually fair, given your situation. Fair? Preston spun around. They're stealing my father's company. No, Frank said quietly. You're selling your father's company to avoid bankruptcy. There's a difference. Preston glared at his accountant. Whose side are you on? The side of mathematics. In 24 days, if you don't pay Victor Kozlov, he'll take everything. And unlike these investors, Victor won't leave you with anything. The intercom buzzed. Preston's secretary. Mr. Blackwell, there's a call from Rio Grande Holdings, a Mr. Gerald Morrison. Preston and Gregory exchanged looks. Gerald Morrison, Bill Crawford's legal alias for this deal. Put him through, the speaker crackled. Mr. Blackwell, this is Gerald Morrison with Rio Grande Holdings. I trust you received our offer. I did. I have questions. Of course. We're prepared to answer them. Who's your primary investor? I want names. Our investors prefer to remain private during preliminary negotiations, standard practice in acquisitions of this size. Nothing about this is standard, Preston snapped. My brother's involved. That makes this personal. A pause on the other end. Mr. Blackwell, our offer is 48 hours. We have other investment opportunities if you're not interested. Your letter said 72 hours. We're expediting. 48 hours or we move on. Preston's hand gripped the edge of his desk. I need time to verify your financing, your credentials. We'll provide whatever documentation you require, but the clock is ticking. The line went dead. Preston stood there, fury and desperation warring in his chest. The door opened. Catherine, his wife, walked in wearing tennis clothes and an expression of barely concealed anxiety. I heard there's an offer, she said, from my brother. I don't care if it's from the devil himself. Catherine's voice was sharp. Take it. I'm tired of bill collectors calling the house. I'm tired of worrying about money. This is my father's company. Your father's dead, Preston, and this company is killing us. She walked closer, lowered her voice. Take the offer. Pay Victor, and maybe we can salvage what's left of our lives. Preston looked at the three people in his office, his lawyer, his accountant, his wife, all of them telling him the same thing. He was beaten, and they all knew it. Friday morning, week 5. Preston had called a major meeting with a development group from Dallas, potential clients for a mixed-use project he'd been pitching. It was his last shot at bringing in new revenue, his last chance to show he was still a player. Dan showed up at 8:30 as instructed. Preston's assistant Rachel met him at the elevator with an expression of pure pity. Dan, I'm so sorry. He wants you to... She couldn't finish, just handed him a hanger with a yellow janitor's uniform. Dan stared at it. 4 weeks of mailroom work, warehouse inventory, menial labor. He'd thought maybe Preston was done with the toilet cleaning humiliation. He was wrong. Where? Dan asked quietly. Conference room. The clients arrive at 9. Dan went to the bathroom, changed into the uniform, looked at himself in the mirror. The man staring back had lost 20 pounds, had circles under his eyes, had the posture of someone who'd been beaten. But something was different today. Dan wasn't crying, wasn't shaking. He thought about his father's words. Tomorrow, we're going to war. He thought about Tori's texts. Once he breaks completely, I can divorce him. He thought about Eddie's question. Is any job worth what this is doing to you? Dan picked up the coffee pot from the service cart and walked into the conference room. 6 businessmen from Dallas sat around the polished table. Expensive suits, confident smiles, the smell of success. Preston stood at the head of the table in his element, selling them on his vision. Dan entered quietly, started pouring coffee. Ah, gentlemen, Preston said, gesturing at Dan like he was a prop. This is my son-in-law, teaching him the family business from the foundation up. Builds character. The men chuckled politely. One of them looked uncomfortable. Dan moved around the table, hands steady. No shaking today, no fear. When he reached the third investor, he tilted the pot, just slightly. Coffee splashed across the table, soaking papers and tablets. Jesus! The man jumped back. Preston's face went red. You idiot! You can't even do this right? He pointed at the floor. Get a towel, clean it up, now. Dan set down the coffee pot carefully, walked to the service cart, got a towel. Then he stopped, looked at Preston, at the 6 men watching, at the conference room where he'd imagined working as an executive, not a servant. No, Dan said quietly. Preston's expression shifted to confusion. What? No. Louder this time. I'm not cleaning it up. Dan pulled off the yellow uniform shirt and dropped it on the floor. Underneath, he wore just a plain t-shirt. I quit. The room went silent. Preston's smirk vanished. What did you say? I quit. Dan's voice was steady now, strong. I've had enough. Dan, you can't just... The door opened. Tori walked in, dressed for the meeting. She saw Dan in his t-shirt, the uniform on the floor, coffee everywhere. Their eyes met. Say something, Dan said to her. Her face flushed. Dan, don't make a scene. Say something. Tell your father this is wrong. She glanced at Preston, then back to Dan. We'll talk about this later, not here. There is no later, Tori. There's no baby. There never was a baby, was there? Her face went white. Preston looked between them, confused. What's he talking about, Victoria? Dan laughed, but there was no humor in it. She lied, told me she was pregnant to keep me here, to keep me submitting to your torture, but it was all bullshit. That's not... Tori started. I saw your texts to Madison about how you're waiting for me to break completely so you can divorce me and marry Cameron. One of the Dallas investors stood. I think we should reschedule this meeting. No, stay, Dan said. You should know who you're doing business with. Ask Preston about Viktor Kozlov. Ask him about the $4 million he owes to a Russian loan shark. Ask him why Wagner Development just walked away from buying this company. Preston's face had gone from red to purple. Get out! Get out now! Gladly. Dan walked toward the door, then turned back. You wanted to break me. To prove I wasn't good enough for your daughter, for this company, for your world. His voice carried across the silent room. But here's the thing, Preston. My father is a construction worker. He has calluses on his hands and drives a 15-year-old truck, and he has more integrity in his little finger than you have in your entire body. Dan looked at Tori one last time. I hope Cameron's worth it, because you just lost the only person who actually loved you. He walked out. Behind him, chaos erupted. The Dallas investors gathered their things, made excuses. Tori was crying. Preston was shouting. Dan didn't care. He rode the elevator down, walked through the lobby past Rachel, who was crying at her desk, and stepped out into the Texas sunshine. His phone rang. His father. Dad? Dan, where are you? I just quit. I told Preston everything, about Tori's lies, about Viktor Kozlov, about Wagner walking away. Silence. Then, you beautiful, brave idiot. Dan laughed, surprised. What? You just accelerated our timeline by a week. Preston's going to panic now. He'll be desperate to take any offer that comes his way. What are you talking about? Come to Bill Crawford's office in Austin, 3 o'clock. There's someone you need to meet. Dad, trust me, son. Everything's about to change. By Monday morning, Preston Blackwell was a man on the edge. The Dallas investors had walked out of Friday's meeting and canceled their project. Word was spreading through San Antonio's development community about his loan shark connections, about his son-in-law's public breakdown, about Wagner pulling their offer. Gregory Winters and Frank Morrison sat in Preston's office for an emergency meeting. The mood was funeral. The Rio Grande offer is the only thing on the table, Gregory said, and after Friday's disaster, they might rescind it. They won't, Frank said, looking at his laptop. I just got an email from Gerald Morrison. They're holding firm. $4 million cash, $6 million financed, but they need an answer by tonight. Preston's hands trembled slightly as he lit a cigar. Have you verified them? Completely. Rio Grande Holdings is legitimate. 3 principals, Nathan Blackwell, Michael Stevens, Thomas Bennett, all successful businessmen. The financing is solid, backed by a credit line from First Austin Bank. My brother's trying to steal my company. Your brother's trying to save it, Gregory corrected. Preston, in 21 days, Viktor Kozlov's deadline hits. What do you think happens then? Preston didn't answer. He knew exactly what happened. Viktor's people would show up, and they wouldn't be polite anymore. The door opened without knocking. Tori walked in, her eyes red from crying. Daddy, we need to talk. Not now, Victoria. Dan moved out. He filed for divorce. He's saying horrible things about me to everyone. Preston barely looked at her. I have bigger problems than your marriage right now. Tori's face crumpled, but Preston had already turned away. Catherine appeared in the doorway behind Tori. Preston, I just spoke to Jennifer. Jennifer, Preston's sister, Nathan's twin. They hadn't spoken in 5 years either. What does she want? She's filing a civil lawsuit, says you embezzled from Dad's trust fund. Catherine's voice was ice. Is it true? Preston's cigar stopped halfway to his mouth. That's ancient history. Is it true? I did what I had to do to keep this company alive. Catherine's laugh was bitter. You stole from your father's grandchildren to finance your ego, and now it's all falling apart. She walked closer, and Preston saw something in her eyes he'd never seen before. Contempt. Sign the deal with Rio Grande, Catherine said. Pay Victor, and maybe we can survive this with some dignity intact. After she left, Preston sat alone with Gregory and Frank. Everyone's turned on me, he said quietly. No, Frank replied. Everyone's just tired of protecting you from yourself. Preston's phone rang. The caller ID showed Gerald Morrison. He answered, "Put it on speaker." Mr. Blackwell, we need your decision. We have other opportunities, and we can't wait indefinitely. I want to meet your investors, in person. I want to see who I'm selling to. A pause. That can be arranged. Thursday morning, Hotel Emma, 10 a.m. I'll be there. And Mr. Blackwell, bring your lawyer and your checkbook. If the meeting goes well, we'll close the deal that day. The line went dead. Gregory looked at Preston. This is it. Last chance. Preston stubbed out his cigar. Then I guess I better not waste it. Tuesday morning, Preston hired Marcus Finley, the best private investigator in San Antonio. I need to know who's really behind Rio Grande Holdings, Preston said, sliding a folder across the table. My brother Nathan's listed, but he doesn't have this kind of capital. Marcus charged $500 an hour and was worth it. Give me 48 hours. By Thursday morning, Marcus had answers. Rio Grande Holdings is clean, Marcus said, spreading documents. 3 principals: Nathan Blackwell, Michael Stevens, Thomas Bennett. Stevens runs a development company in Dallas worth $40 million. Bennett owns the biggest construction supply company in South Texas. Your brother's firm is valued around $15 million. So they're legitimate. Completely. The LLC structure is airtight. Could be silent partners, but I can't prove it. The credit line through First Austin Bank is solid, $6 million secured against Blackwell Properties assets. Why would they invest in a failing company? Marcus shrugged. Maybe they see value you don't, or maybe one of them has personal reasons. Preston thought about Nathan, about forcing him out 5 years ago. It's Nathan. He's been waiting for me to fail. Probably, but that doesn't make it illegal. If you sign, they own 60%. If you don't, Victor Kozlov owns everything in 19 days. Preston drove to Hotel Emma with Gregory and Frank, his stomach churning. Everyone had been right. He'd destroyed his father's company, and now strangers were taking it from him. The conference room at Hotel Emma overlooked the San Antonio River. Preston arrived at 10 sharp with his lawyer and accountant. 3 men in business suits stood to greet them. Michael Stevens, Rio Grande Holdings. Strong handshake, confident. Thomas Bennett. Older, weathered hands, something familiar Preston couldn't place. David Richardson. Distinguished, clearly money. Nathan wasn't there. I expected my brother, Preston said. Nathan's our architectural consultant. He'll join shortly. Please, sit. Bill Crawford, as Gerald Morrison, laid out documents. $4 million cash at closing for 60%, $6 million financed over 5 years. You retained 40% and a consultant role at $80,000 annually. Consultant, a glorified employee in his own company. The $4 million is available today, Bill said. Wire transfer upon signing. Enough to pay Victor. Enough to survive. Gregory reviewed the contract. It's standard, clean. Preston stared at the papers. 40 years his father had built this. 15 years Preston had run it. I need a moment. The 3 men stepped out. Preston sat with Gregory and Frank. Last chance, Gregory said. Walk away now. In 19 days you have nothing. At least I'd have my dignity. Frank laughed bitterly. Preston, you lost your dignity when you humiliated Dan in front of employees. This is just consequences. Preston stared at his accountant, shocked. I've worked for you 12 years, Frank continued. I've watched you bully people, destroy them. Your nephew, Tori's ex-fiancé, Dan Hayes. You're not losing this company to bad luck. You're losing it because you're cruel, and you finally ran out of people to abuse. Preston walked to the window. San Antonio sprawled below, the city where he'd been somebody. I want to meet your primary investor, the real power behind this deal. Gregory sighed. Preston, don't. I'm not signing until I know who I'm dealing with. Gregory made the call, listened, hung up. They're sending someone. The door opened. A man in work boots and jeans, button-down shirt, calloused hands, weathered face, someone who'd spent decades doing physical labor. Preston squinted. Something familiar. Then recognition hit. You. Rob Hayes walked in, pulled out a chair, sat down. Mr. Blackwell, we meet again. Preston's mind reeled. What is this? Nathan entered, stood beside Rob. Hello, Preston. You're the investor? You're a construction worker. Construction company owner, Rob corrected. 35 years building Hayes Construction from nothing. While you leased luxury cars and mortgaged mansions, I lived small and invested smart. Rental properties in 2008, stocks when they were cheap, same truck for 15 years. You can't have this kind of money. I have $3.2 million. Nathan invested $2 million. Michael, David, and Thomas each invested $1 million. More than enough. Bill set a folder in front of Preston. Bank statements, portfolios, everything verified. Why? Preston's voice cracked. Rob's expression hardened. 3 weeks ago, I found my son with a business degree, my son I sacrificed everything for, on his knees scrubbing your toilet while you laughed. I was teaching him, you were breaking him. You humiliated him in front of everyone, made him serve coffee in a janitor's uniform. Rob stood. You tried to destroy him to prove your superiority. I run my company how I see fit. Had, Nathan said. Past tense, you had a company. Preston turned to Gregory. This can't be legal. It's completely legal. Every transaction is documented. The offer is fair given your circumstances. I won't do it. Then don't, Rob said. Walk away. In 19 days, Victor takes everything. You get nothing. You can't. Rob pulled out his phone. Bill, send the withdrawal letter. We're moving on. Wait! Preston's desperation leaked through. Rob lowered the phone. What do you want? Sign the papers. Walk away. Never speak to my son again. That's it? No. Your daughter finalizes her divorce from Dan. No contest, clean break. Rob sat down. And starting Monday, Dan becomes CEO. You'll report to him if you stay. Preston's head snapped up. You can't be serious. Completely serious. Your son-in-law, the man you tried to destroy, will run your father's company better than you ever did. Silence. Preston's hands trembled as he reached for the pen. I'll sue you. Go ahead. You'll lose and waste what's left, or take the $4 million, pay your debts, and walk away alive. Preston signed, page after page, signature getting shakier. Bill notarized, gathered the documents. Wire transfer completes within the hour. Preston stood at the door. This isn't over. Yes, Rob said quietly. It is. Dan sat in Bill's Austin conference room with Eddie Sullivan, confused why his father had summoned them. The door opened. Rob walked out with Nathan, Michael, David, Thomas, and Bill. Dan, meet Nathan Blackwell, your former father-in-law's brother. Nathan shook Dan's hand. Your father just bought Blackwell Properties. We all did, but your father led it. Dan looked at Rob. What? We bought the company, Rob said, and we're giving it to you. Dad, I don't want it. I don't want anything from that place. Then change it, Nathan said. Make it something different. Dan shook his head. What if I'm not good enough? Eddie spoke up. Kid, I know what it takes to run it right. You've got it in you. Your father spent his life savings to buy you dignity, Nathan added. Don't insult him by doubting yourself. Dan looked at Rob. His father's eyes were steady, confident. I believe in you, son. Always have. Why did you do this? Because no one gets to break my boy. Rob gripped his shoulder. And because you earned better. Michael stepped forward. We're all betting on you, Dan, betting you'll run it with integrity, treat people right. What happens now? You decide, Rob said. Walk away and we find someone else, or step up and show Preston who you really are. Dan walked to the window, thinking. Eddie cleared his throat. That company hurt a lot of people. Preston's nephew, Tori's ex-fiancée, dozens more. Someone needs to fix it. Make it right. Dan turned back. Okay, but new name. Hayes and Associates Development. Rob's eyes glistened. Why Hayes? Because I learned more about integrity from you than Preston could teach in a lifetime. Rob pulled his son into a hug. That's my boy. 3 months later, 80 employees packed the Hayes and Associates conference room, uncertain, anxious about the changes. Dan stood at the front with Rob and Eddie Sullivan, who wore a suit for the first time in 20 years. 3 months ago, I was on my knees in this building scrubbing toilets, Dan began. Some of you saw it, some looked away. I don't blame anyone. I understand fear, but the fear ends today. He paused, looking at the faces watching him. This company has new ownership and a new culture. We value people, all people. I'm announcing changes. Profit sharing for all employees, mental health support, zero tolerance harassment, promotion from within. Applause started, growing. Eddie Sullivan showed me kindness when no one else would. He's now Director of Facilities, leading our Employee Wellness Initiative. The applause grew louder. Finally, we're starting 2 affordable housing projects on the west side. We're building homes for people who need them, not just people who can afford them. Standing ovation. After the meeting, a woman knocked on Dan's office door. Mr. Hayes, I'm Emily Carter, architect on the West Side project. Dan shook her hand. Call me Dan. Emily smiled. What you're doing is remarkable. If you'd like to discuss the project over coffee, I have ideas for making the homes more sustainable. Dan smiled back, genuine, for the first time in months. I'd like that. After she left, Rob appeared. How's it feel? Terrifying. What if I mess up? You won't. You've got good people. And you've got something Preston never had, a conscience. Rob stood beside his son. I'm proud of you. Thanks, Dad, for everything. That's what fathers do. 6 months later. Preston lived in a 2-bedroom apartment off Broadway. The mansion, foreclosed. The cars, repossessed. Catherine divorced him. Jennifer's lawsuit cost him $500,000. He worked at a small firm in New Braunfels. Decent pay, humiliating work. His boss was younger than Dan. Sometimes he saw news about Hayes and Associates, awards for sustainable development. Dan profiled in the Business Journal. Late at night, Preston knew the truth. He'd destroyed himself. Rob Hayes just accelerated it. Tori remarried quickly, a tech executive, older, wealthy. 6 months later, tabloids reported divorce proceedings. She'd lied about several things again. She'd tried contacting Dan once. He'd declined. Dan and Emily had been dating 4 months when she moved into his apartment. Rob met her on Sunday. Dan talks about you constantly, Emily said. Says you're his hero. I'm just his dad. Later, Nathan arrived with coffee. The kitchen filled with laughter, Dan's stories, Emily's questions, Nathan's commentary, Rob's pancakes. Rob looked at them and felt complete peace. 6 months later, Dan called. Dad, come over. We want to talk. When Rob arrived, they sat him down. We're engaged, Dan said. Rob hugged them both, crying. Dad, Emily said softly, my father wasn't in my life. Watching you with Dan, seeing how you love him, I've always wanted that. Will you walk me down the aisle? Yes, of course, yes. Later, driving home, Rob thought about 35 years of work, $8.2 million spent in one transaction. People asked if he regretted it. Rob looked at his small house, thought about Sunday breakfasts and his son's happiness. No, he said, I don't regret a damn thing. Because money grows back. But dignity? Dignity is priceless.